All right, hello. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Marketing Guides for Small Businesses podcast. I'm Paul and joined by Jen and Ian, who's currently traveling, but he recorded his answers for us, and Ken. And today we're going to talk about off-page SEO, what it is, what it's not. And we always seem to go over our allotted time. We like to keep the podcast under an hour. We never seem to do that. So hopefully we'll do that today. All that being said, Ken, I'm going to start with you. So usually, when we talk about SEO, we're referring to on-page SEO. And we've talked a lot about that in previous podcasts, but today we're talking about off-page SEO. So what is that and why is it important and why should a small business care about it?
Yeah, well, simplistically, it's everything that you can do to improve your rankings that's not done through your own website. So, there are a lot of different things that you can do. Getting links historically has always been one of the most important things, but there are more things than that. I mean, getting brand mentions, you building citations, which aren't the same as links, but they're super important. um, you know, Continuing to create content through multiple channels, including social media, and other things. So really, it's just think of it as um, you want to look and you want to see where all of this stuff is coming from outside your website, because every one of these links, citations, whatever classification it is in off page, that sends a signal to Google or the other search engines. It's a little vote of confidence in your website. If they feel it's important enough to mention your website, if they share, provide a link to your website, if your business is listed on a directory, it's just a little vote of confidence. And so it's really the cumulative set of things that you do there. And you can monitor how all of this works. And I think ultimately what you want to try to do is, if you're trying to, especially when it comes to local SEO, but even national SEO, you're looking at, you got to be looking at your competitors as well. And you need to be closing that gap, because if they're outranking you, it's probably because they've done a better job of off-page SEO than you have with your website. Could be a whole variety of reasons why. They may have more products or services that and blog posts that offer an opportunity for links. They may have owned their domain name for a lot longer than you. There are a whole lot of other reasons. But you want to look at what they're doing and you want to close the gap. You want to find ways to, and look, I mean, if you're using any credible tool set, it's going to give you really good ideas about, what the links are and what the other factors are from off page for your competitors' websites. Um, I mean, if you're the member of the same association and they've got a link and you don't, go get that link. It's easy to do. We'll get into some more of the details about what all that means here, throughout the rest of the episode. But, simplistically, it's, on page SEO or all of the things that you can do to your website to improve its search engine optimization. Off page literally is everything that's not on your website that you can do to improve how you rank.
All right, that was a good intro into
That's a good intro.
my question for Ian, which he recorded for us. So a lot of people use off-page SEO and link building interchangeably, but Ken touched on some of this. There's more to it. So one thing that comes in mind, and Ken mentioned, is brand building. So Ian has recorded a video that talks about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people do, when they're thinking of SEO, they're thinking about on-page SEO for the most part. And part of that is because marketers often talk about that more often than they do about off-page SEO. But off-page SEO is super important. And brand building is all about creating brand recognition and an affinity for your brand, so that when people see your brand or they hear about it, they think positively towards it. Think about some of the brands that you care about, that you like. whenever you see that car with that logo on it, or see a commercial or a video or a post by one of the brands you love, you feel an affinity towards it. And in the same way, brands can be very powerful. We've all experienced it. We all love brands. We all trust certain brands. And Google realizes this and rewards brands for this authority that they've built up over time. Brand building all comes down to building online authority for both the users and search engines like Google. So how does brand building help with SEO? It's all about brand searches. When people increasingly search for your brand name or the name of your specific products or services, or even your domain name, Google is watching all of this and it values that. Why does Google care about brand searches? Well, you have to remember that Google results are all about providing the best results to searchers so that they'll continue to use the search engine. So when Google sees a growing number of people searching for the brand, your brand, it will introduce this into the results because it sees that people value this. And of course, this can give your brand a real leg up over the competition if you can get your brand showing up in searches more often. The other reason Google cares about brand searches is that it shows credibility. When you build a brand that people look for, you are credible in their eyes and in the eyes of Google. And when you build a brand, you will find that you naturally earn links and mentions across the web to your website and your brand.
Technical error there. Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's all good.
No problem. So, Jen, what about press releases and guest posting? Can those be part of an off-page SEO strategy?
In short, yes, they can. I'll talk a little bit about guest posting, but then I'll spend most of my time on the press releases, because the press releases can be, I was going to use the word controversial. I'm not sure it's that dramatic, but I'll get into that and explain that as well. So yes, guest posting can be used for off-page SEO. What guest posting means, for those of you that aren't aware of it, it would be you're producing a blog on someone else's website. And the neat thing about that is you and your ideas and your company ideas are exposed to a different audience. And then typically you have your byline either at the top or the bottom, which would give, a 1 or 2 sentence introduction about yourself, your company, and then typically a link back to your website. So that's how that would help. With press releases, so I mean, here's the controversy or the drama around press releases is how they were intended or how they were used in the past by journalists, reporters. The press is not the same way that they're used today or have been used for a long time. Back in the day, it would be you put out a press release to the Wire, which was like this major, distribution center where reporters and journalists would look for the news coming in each day, each hour on a certain topic. Obviously, we don't need to do that anymore, but press releases and press release companies and the Wire and putting a press release out onto the Wire, that still exists. And people will happily take their money to have that done for you. So, and there's nothing, negative about that, but just in your expectation of if we do a press release because we're launching a product or we brought on, a new executive or something interesting is happening within our company and we want to let the public know, or if we're public and we have to let the public know, the press release, just be aware that setting a press release out isn't going to garner you the press attention you may think it would or it may have done decades ago. What it does help with is it being a piece of content that would have information about your company, links back to your website, perhaps pictures, videos. Usually, just by the nature of it being called a news release, it is timely information about changes happening in your business. that kind of information would go out. So what you would do for that is put it out to the wire. That is a paid thing that you do. And depending how far you want it distributed, either within an industry or within regions of the world, you would pay more or less for that. However, what is neat about that is those links and the distribution of wherever your press release does end up, even if it gets picked up by publications that may not be, say, the A-list, or may not be the New York Times or the exact, journalists of your industry that you want to cover it, there will still be a pickup on it, and that still counts for Google. So press releases do work in that way. Just be very, very careful that you're not using them just hoping you're going to get a whole bunch of press inquiries as a result of using the press release.
Yeah, Jen, I think it also kind of dovetails into what Ian was just talking about too, with brand mentions. He was talking more about brand building, but a press release, even though it doesn't give you, the link attribution from an SEO perspective in Google with most press release systems, especially traditional press release systems, gives them the SEO benefit, not your business. But it does still help because there are mentions of your business, because there's content, as you said, that includes references to your business. And so from that perspective, it definitely sends some signals. It's just not nearly what it used to be if you're using a traditional press release system. You're absolutely right.
So, Ken, even though I call this off-page SEO, it's not just links. It's links, or you can't ignore them. They're still a very important part of off-page SEO. So, can you talk about what link building is? Because it's not an easy thing to do. It takes time. It takes effort. It can be expensive. So, can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, link building is probably the workhorse of many SEO, off-page SEO strategies still to this day. I think a lot of people still think that, having a link building strategy is what's going to give you the most bang for the buck in terms of uplift for your search engine optimization. So really, what you're trying to do is you not all, I mentioned before that, whenever somebody links from their website and they link back to your website, that's a little vote of confidence, in the eyes of the search engines. Here's the reality: not every vote is equal. So having a bunch of votes doesn't necessarily make the difference for you. You need to think about things like the authority of the website that is linking to you. And every website, is assigned, an authority factor in the eyes of the search engines that, is based on the traffic that's going to the website, the number of links that they have, the number of unique links that they have, the authority of the websites that are linking to them, whether or not some of those links are follows or no follows. All of these things are rolled in, and every website is assigned a domain authority or some kind of a authority score. And so you really want to work on getting authority websites to link to your content. And so there are some ways that you can do that. If you're focused on a niche, or you work in a specific industry, let's use painters, for example. There's the Painting Contractor Association. Well, if you're a member of the Painting Contractor Association, the Painting Contractor Association website, because it's an association, probably is going to carry strong domain authority in the eyes of the search engines, because they see that it's a trusted site, because it is an authority, it is a policing and an organizing association that is geared toward a specific industry. So having a link from an association website like that is going to carry more weight than a friend's business across the street, and they're like, okay, well, cool, I'm an auto mechanic. I'm going to link to your website on my website. Maybe you'll do the same thing for me. And it's like, well, yeah, you can do that, but they probably don't have a very high domain authority. I mean, most local businesses, unless they've really invested a lot in local search engine optimization, just don't carry, the authority and the weight. So think of authority as a way to weight the vote. The other thing that you want to think about is, the number of unique domains. So you could have, that one authoritative domain, in this case, an association that you're a member of. You could have dozens of links from them, but if those are where all of your links are coming from, and you don't have other unique domains that are linking to you from, you know, other bloggers that find your blog posts interesting and they decide that they want to reference it and then link to it when they're writing their blog posts, um, you know, local chambers of commerce, if you're not listed with them and they're not linking back to your website. The topical relevance, I think, is also important to factor in. Like I mentioned, just because somebody across the street that you happen to know decides that they want to link to your website from their website, well, that's a nice gesture. But again, don't think that that's going to be the big difference maker here. You really want to think about authority, unique domains, and topical relevance. The more you can get that, the better. Now, also, an easy way to think, and look about, authority is, your local newspapers. If they write an article about you and they link to your website, that's going to carry a lot of authority. It's local, and news sources typically are rated higher with authority scores in the eyes of the search engines than many other websites, partly because they create a massive amount of content. And if they're providing trustworthy content in the eyes of the search engines, it's going to be valuable. Um, I mean, anything that is a .gov or a .org tends to carry, or .edu for education. So, government education, or even some orgs, charities, for example, and things like that. Um, they tend to be trusted by and assigned higher domain authorities, or authority scores, I should say, than maybe the typical website, until they prove to the search engines otherwise, really. So if they're doing bad behavior and doing hinky things, of course they're going to get knocked down. And so I can't make I can't just make a general statement, but those are good places to kind of sniff out those types of opportunities. Um, and really, you want to work hard to get authority, and authority doesn't necessarily have to be topical. It can be local. So authority can come, like I mentioned, from a local chamber of commerce. If in your city, having them linked to you may be every bit as important, maybe even more important than, you know the industry that you work in, and somebody linking to you from that industry. So you need to monitor and analyze this stuff, and this is where, a lot of business owners might be able to do a reasonably good job with several elements of the on-page SEO. They're going to have to invest time and effort. They're going to have to study it. They're going to have to learn, best practices and implement all of those kinds of things. Off-page SEO is a lot harder, and it's more technical, and it's probably something that the average person is not going to easily be able to do.
And a couple things if I could add. Google's become very clear about buying links. In the past, that's kind of been a tactic, and they've gotten very good about figuring that out, and link farms and things like that. I won't go into it, but the other thing is the way Google weights these links. Let's say if you're in the finance industry and you get a link from Forbes, getting 15 links from Forbes isn't necessarily going to help you much more than getting one link from Forbes, because Google links, they weight that first link very heavily, and the ones that follow, they give it a lot less weight. So that's why unique links are important.
Well, we call it the web for a reason, right? I mean,
Correct.
Google and the search engines love the interconnectedness of things. And if your website is worthy of being interconnected with a lot of other properties across the web, then you're doing a good job on off-page SEO.
Yes, it's the interconnectedness of the web. That's very true. I mean, it's a good point.
Yeah.
So back to Ian's recorded answer. So when we think about and we talk about content marketing, most of us immediately think of on-page SEO, content marketing, on-page SEO, but content marketing can also be used for off-page SEO, and Ian can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's so true. You know, when we think about content marketing, our thinking gravitates towards thinking about our own website, because that's the property that we have the most control over. But when it comes to content marketing, you need to take a more holistic view and look at on-page and off-page tactics. Publishing great content on your website is absolutely vital and shouldn't be overlooked. But any content you publish across the internet is still content marketing, and it's valuable. Creating good quality, engaging content will make other people want it. So some common off-page content that you can leverage are infographics, guest posts, where you post an article on another website, especially a website that has a higher authority than yours. White papers, ebooks, even links from real books. So if you publish a real book and link back to your website, super powerful. Surveys, studies, research papers, even quizzes, calculators, all of those kind of things that people find of value, they'll link back to you. Videos can also be a powerful type of content that links back to your site and provides you with greater authority. It also makes sense that content marketing is a powerful contribution to the success of your other off-page techniques like link building, PR, social media, and advertising. Content is the fuel that powers those tactics. And when you have great content, people will look for it. And you need to tell everyone about it everywhere you possibly can. And it will result in increased SEO results and increased authority for you on search engines.
Very concise answer.
Yeah, one thing that I was surprised, because I know Ian's talked about this in the past, are infographics. Infographics are great pieces of content that you can create. And, if you design them correctly, you actually, they're embed code. So they actually, when somebody takes that infographic and they put that on the website, it actually is naturally building a link back to the source that created the infographic. And, and that can be a valuable strategy. And infographics are those pieces of content, it's, again, anything that summarizes and provides a resource to people is generally seen as quality and usually trusted content until you prove otherwise. I mean, so again, if you're doing hinky stuff where it's the kind of stuff that Google picks up on and they realize that you're trying to game the system, they're going to whack you down, right? But this is I think it's a pretty good strategy to do. These are not simple, easy to create. I mean, you definitely have to, put a lot of work into creating a quality infographic, but that's another great strategy, I think.
Yeah, and one thing about infographics to keep in mind when you're designing them, make sure and look at them on mobile, because back when infographics were a huge thing and a lot of people were doing them, they were designing for desktop. Well, most searches now are done on mobile, and sometimes those infographics might look great on mobile, or on desktop, maybe even a tablet, but you look at them on your phone and they're basically useless. So infographics can be very powerful. Just make sure you look at them on mobile, because if you don't, they might not work that good. Yeah. So Jen, we're sitting here doing our podcast, which we do every week.
Yeah.
So can that be part of your off-page SEO strategy?
In short, yes, it can. Yeah, absolutely, it can. There's a couple things about podcasts. So as we're recording this in, I guess the fall. Oh my goodness, it's the fall already of 2022. Even though podcasts are very popular, not every business is using them. And so there's a huge opportunity there as a piece of content to get using and get doing a podcast for your own business and making it part of your marketing strategy. So with podcasts, so what happens here is as we're going today, there are so we're recording this for audio purposes. We upload it to a podcast network and it goes out. We also are recording live, and with each of our different businesses, we were able to link to one live channel. So right now, I think for you, Ken, you're broadcasting this live on LinkedIn. Is that right? Because we're doing,
Yeah.
I think, or you're doing YouTube, or Ian's firm is doing YouTube. We're doing Facebook. So, right now for the video, it is live. And of course, available on recording or on replay there. But with the podcast, they're a very good way to reach a new audience because there will be people searching for and looking through and trying out different podcasts that may not know yet about your company. I know you do a lot of you do another podcast as well where you're hosting and interviewing other businesses and giving them exposure to an audience that they previously didn't have exposure to. And that's a great way to expose and expand your business and your offering to new audiences. So as a piece of content that will be posted elsewhere besides Google and discoverable and almost discoverable, but an entirely new audience than maybe searching for you on Google, it's a fabulous piece of content to do that with. Nevertheless, not only having the podcast, but we have talked about this before, we have the podcast, then we're able to chop it up. So we can chop it up into different sound bites, put that out on social. The deal that we have here on our podcast is whoever hosts it that week gets the transcript and is able to put the transcript, formulate that into a written blog and put that on their website for that week as their piece of content. So besides having it go on, it's off your website, plus you can chop it up and drive content and drive traffic back to your website. It's a fabulous way to do off-page SEO.
Yeah. Can I add to that a little bit?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So from a guest podcasting perspective, it's also a huge benefit because what you're able to do is you're able to, if you're a guest on another popular podcast, you have the ability to work with that host to determine where you want to have them link to back to your website. And it may be the homepage, but you can have it linked to, like if you do, 3 or 4 different services, but you're being interviewed by a host or you're a guest of a podcast that's one of, only one of those 4 services, for example, then it can go to that service page specifically. And so it's a great way to build your own links, from leveraging the power of a website that is already podcasting websites usually are, again, they're going to rank pretty well. And so, and they're getting you in front of all of their audience. And so, so that's going to drive some traffic back to your website as well as building some links.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, so what Ken's saying is that as a small business owner, you don't have to host a podcast. You can just be a guest on other podcasts, and that will help your off-page SEO. And as I was putting this together, I tend to go down in the technical rabbit hole sometimes. Some people may have noticed that, but one of the things about all this off-page SEO is Google's concept of entities, and I promise I won't go into that. But Google has moved from what's called lexical search into semantic search, which means that Google is trying to understand search intent. And this goes back to the branding and what Google considers an entity. And this is where your off-page SEO really comes into play, because nothing exists in a silo. The lexical search was back where Google tried to say, okay, they use this keyword, so this is what they're looking for. Now they're looking at things as a relationship. Is this a navigational search? Is this a brand search? Is this a buyer intent search? So they're using semantic queries to try and figure out what people are looking for and return the best search result. And yeah, this goes back to the local search pack. Yes, what business or entity is closest to you and can best serve your query. And that's where this whole entity and branding really comes into play from an off-page SEO. And I probably just confused the hell out of everybody, but it's important to understand that Google's algorithm changes every day. And sometimes they release these huge updates that really screw things up, but every day they make minor tweaks to their algorithms. And it's an ongoing process. And I just think that's important to understand. I don't know if anyone has anything to add, but look at that. We kept it to about a half hour so far.
Yeah, I will just jump in and add a little bit. So a lot of people tend to think that social media is the silver bullet, and that if they post on social media and they provide links back to their website, that they're getting links to their website. Well, those links aren't the same as a link from from another website, because social media sites they're no follow links. And jump in and correct me, Paul, if I'm misstating something. But so they send signals, which are very important, just like Paul talked about, but they are not links. Like if I linked from an article on my website, a blog post that I wrote, referencing, Jen, who had written an article on her website about, how do you write a white paper. If I link to her website, then that's a true link. But if I share a link on a social media site to the article that Jen wrote, that's not the same as a link from a website, because it's coming from social media, and social media doesn't provide the full sharing and the full benefit. But there are all these different properties that are out there. Still, that doesn't mean you don't want to do it. It's the cumulative omni-channel thing that we've always talked about. Even if a citation is not a full-blown link, but being listed on a directory sends a signal to the search engines to say, hey, this business is on this directory. This directory is somebody that I tend to trust the business information about. Okay. So you got to think about that. All of this stuff is cumulative, and that's why, the web is this giant interconnectedness of stuff, and you got to think about it that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. It goes back to nothing exists in a silo. That you're right. A directory or social media may not be a direct link, but Google's algorithm has gotten so sophisticated that they roll all this back into this is an entity.
Mm-hmm.
It all comes back to this entity.
Yeah.
As Google, and an entity is a complicated thing, and it's not a complicated thing. So your business is an entity. An actor, a popular person, an influencer is an entity. So and Google rolls all of these things in. If someone does a video on YouTube and they mention you, okay, that's not a direct link, but Google will pick up on that. And that's how sophisticated their algorithm is. It's gotten so sophisticated that they screw things up. But
yeah.
But unless anyone has anything more to add, I think this is probably a good place to wrap up. And
Yeah.
thanks everyone for joining us. And we'll be back next week. Don't know what we're talking about, but we'll be back next week.